This episode of the Cyclist Magazine Podcast is brought to you by Trek. Now, there is nothing cooler than a custom bike. Your own carefully selected components, a dialed-in setup, and most important of all, that custom paint. Now, Trek knows this only too well, which is why it set up its own custom bike builder program, Trek Project One. Now, trust me, Project One is seriously cool. I've been lucky enough to ride some Project One bikes over the years for Cyclist Magazine, and many moons ago, because Trek has been honing the program for years now, I visited Trek's HQ in the States to see the paint production line for Project One in full swing. So think Skynet meets tattoo artists. It's all sort of robot arms and painters in hazmat suits listening to death metal. Now, custom can be overwhelming, so Trek offers a range of Project One options, from the signature series of stock designs and colours to the Icon series, guided by the skill of Trek's in-house artists. And if you have the imagination for it, there's Trek's Project One Ultimate, which is a full-gas custom paint program. Don't spare the retinas. You know, ideas are your only limit. Your one-of-a-kind bike then gets built by Trek's master builders and delivered to you, perfect in every bolt, ready to roll. Prices start from a £750 upcharge, so to start customising your dream Trek now, exactly as you imagined it, head over to trekbikes.com and hit the Road Then Customise tabs. That's trekbikes.com, hit the Road Then Customise tabs, or look in our show notes.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cyclist Magazine Podcast. I'm Will Strickson, your host for today. James is not here. Let's all cry. But I am joined by the wonderful Robyn Davison. Robyn, how are you?
Oh, it's lovely to be back again. Always like having a good chin wag.
It's 2025. Do you feel old?
I always feel old, but that's more to do with like my always sore muscles and...
Yeah, and you're speaking as like one of the youngest members of the Cyclist Magazine team, probably younger than 99% of the audience listening, so you're not getting any sympathy at all. Our guest today will be, you've seen from the title already, it will be the wonderful Lael Wilcox, who you know who she is already probably, especially if you've clicked. You know, she's one of the greatest ultra distance riders probably of all time. I don't have a long list, but you know, her achievements speak for themselves, and we will be talking about her around the world record that she set last year. It depends when you listen to this. You could be listening to this in the future. If so, 2024, let's just be specific. It's Lael Wilcox. How are you doing now? You've done one of the best achievements in cycling ever, and you're just now living normal life again. How does that feel?
Yeah, it's so good. I finished, about just over 2 months ago, the ride around the world, and I'm home in Tucson, Arizona, and I'm doing great. I actually got to race 160K this weekend, and I finished in under 4 hours.
You must have felt like this is so short. We'll be doing to surely another two times of this.
Time travel, the speed, it was incredible. So it's been really cool. It's kind of turned out that the around the world ride was like a huge training block, and now I'm in the best shape of my life, and I'm still excited to ride. So that's a big surprise.
Where do you get your passion for riding from? It just seems to kind of like just spring out of you.
I think it's become so normal. And of course I go through phases of, especially in these big rides where I'm like, oh God, I just feel awful and this is so hard and I'm riding into a headwind for multiple days and that's tough. But, once I get like a full night of sleep, I'm just excited to be back out there. I guess it's like this, it's such a sensory overload. It's like I get to see so much and I'm meeting people and I'm kind of learning about the world and also just spending time in my own head kind of processing everything. So I think, I guess when I'm not riding, I'm thinking about it. And it's just become something I love more and more over the years.
I guess it's one of those things now, you've done all the riding that you have. It's like, can you get any harder than what you've achieved now? So any ride, it's like, yeah, I can do this. It's easy. So you're never, even when you're in a pain on a ride now, there's probably nothing in your mind that is saying, oh no, actually I can't do this.
Right. I never really think about quitting or stopping, but different styles are harder than others. Like road riding, fairly easy on the body. I do a lot of technical mountain biking. And this winter, I'll be racing the Iditarod on a fat bike. And that's an extreme cold. So the challenges do change. But I think that's a good thing too, because if I do too much of the same thing, it doesn't feel as special. So if I switch disciplines or I switch the format or something changes about it, then it's like fresh and exciting again. And I feel like there's like a whole world of cycling, like the different ways you can go, the different styles of riding, the different bikes themselves, the different places, I'm in. So I think it's always something new, which is good.
Going back to the beginning, how do you decide I'm gonna attempt the around the world record, and how do you go about planning it? How long does planning take? I feel like planning something like that probably takes as long as riding it.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this since 2016. So that year I raced across the US, west to east coast. It was like 7,000 K. And my favorite way to get to the start of races is to actually ride there from home. So that trip was down from Alaska. I think I combined riding in a ferry and ended up, riding like 3,000 K to the start. And then during that ride to the start, I thought, what if this race across the country was my start of riding around the world? And it was like a fresh idea and I was super excited, but I didn't have like anything set up for it. The only thing I did was to get a new passport. And then I raced across the country and I actually won that race, and it was so hard and so exciting. But by the end, I was totally trashed, and I was like, I'm sick of riding and never want to see a bike again. So I took a break, but I think the thought was still in my mind from that point, like someday I would like to go after this around the world ride and record. And then I had, at that point, took a break from riding road entirely just because of the risk. You're in traffic. The chance of getting hit by a car is pretty high. So I thought I probably shouldn't do that. And then it was still kind of kicking around in my head. And I was, I think 2 years ago, riding to the start line again of another race in Canada. And I was riding primarily road and thought, this is so fun. And it is a risk, but I can do my best to try to stay safe, make a pretty safe route on secondary roads, wear a high-vis vest, have good lights, and not get sleep deprived. So that was kind of my strategy going into this. And I started planning this year in January, and then started the ride in May. So it was a pretty short planning period. And the way I went about it was the most important part was the route. And I don't feel confident in building a 29,000 K route by myself. So I asked friends in different continents to build these for me, people I trusted. So I had a couple, and Luca built the route across Europe and Turkey to Georgia. My friend Mitch Docker made the route across Australia. Friend Hannah built the route across New Zealand, and then I used Adventure Cycling Association routes for the lower 48 of the U.S., and that kind of got me to the goal. And then I had to get my bike set up, and my wife Rue decided she wanted to come along to document the trip. So we just scrambled to get to the start, and then. With this kind of thing, I am not a huge planner. I thought, just wing it. I'm going to try to ride like 270 K a day. When I get to the end of a track, I have to book a flight to get to the next continent, and we'll just go from there. But I thought, I don't know. I can't really imagine exactly how this is going to go down. I know I'll have some setbacks along the way. The main thing was just trying to stay consistent with my distance per day to get to the overall goal, which was to finish in 110 days. And I achieved that. The previous women's record was 124. And then sometimes out there, I thought, I'm never going to finish. But I stayed disciplined, I stayed consistent, and then surprised myself by finishing, a day and a half faster. So I was thrilled.
And when you were planning as well, did you cover rides that you had also done yourself from other previous rides? Did you ever try and test out areas you thought you were going to cover on the route, or was it all just kind of I'm relying on my friends. If they say that's the way to go, it's the way to go.
Pretty much. Yeah. I had ridden the stretch from Alaska through Canada and then down the west coast of the US. So that was all familiar. The rest of it was all new. And I didn't really even look ahead. I just played it day by day. I thought, okay, this is the next stretch. And then mostly every day was about, can I find like a town with some kind of hotel or accommodation? So I just booked those through like booking.com. I mean, it was pretty in the moment.
It's amazing, honestly. I love it.
I also just had so much else to do leading up to the start date. I was running a girls program in home in Arizona. I hosted a women's rally in Spain. And so I was just too busy to kind of sit in front of the computer and like look ahead. And but I also thought, this is like an adventure of a lifetime. It's not just about like hitting the numbers. I had this goal of like, I do want to break this record, but along the way, I also wanted to have a good time. I wanted to ride in beautiful places. So the route, I encouraged my friends to add in a bunch of mountain passes and because I was like, okay, I had like a priority list for the route. It was like, I want it to be safe. That's the biggest priority, like quieter roads, shoulders, bike paths, that kind of stuff. Second was if it can be beautiful or interesting in addition, let's do that. So we routed through like every big city over like the mountains that made sense along the way and made it pretty scenic too. And that was, it's like, and sometimes I'd even kind of detour off route to go see something. Like if there was like a historic church, or I went to Bruges in the canals, because I think, it's like you can't go within a kilometer and not go see that. So I just added in. And because I thought I might never be back here. I have to take this opportunity to also like get to see the world while I'm riding around it.
So how much quicker could you have been if you'd have just stuck to the goal?
Who knows? I really don't know, but I think there are so many factors in that. It was like I wasn't super obsessive with everything being the most efficient, but I was like pretty disciplined with not wasting too much time. And then so many other things could have gone worse. I feel like, of course, you're going to have like problems arise. But I mean, nothing was catastrophic. I didn't get hit by a car. My bike didn't break catastrophically. I didn't get really injured or really sick. So I feel like there is also a lot of kind of luck that goes into this. And I feel like I had a pretty lucky run. My bike never got lost in the airplane, on and on with the list of all the things that could go wrong. So I think, it's a mixed bag, and it doesn't make me feel like, I have to go back and do it again faster. I think, what a gift that I got to do this and I got to the end. I mean, I was so relieved to finish. I mean, I was so excited that, the ride went well, but also just like, oh my God, I'm done. I don't have to like worry about problems anymore, so it was good. It worked out. I think I'm happy with that. And I'm happy to have this time established, and I'm happy for some other woman to go crush it, because I do think that's it's beatable for sure.
When you're doing that, obviously you said you had your friends plan the route, but for those that don't know, you don't have to cover every inch of the earth to say you've gone around the world. So your route went, obviously you have to jump the oceans and whatever, but you go from Georgia to Australia, right? So you don't do
Yes.
Asia. So you're still doing the distance. What went into that?
Typically, people would cross Russia. As an American citizen,
Not easy.
I don't think that's a good idea. Yeah, we're like basically at war with them.
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't advise it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, technically maybe, but honestly, I don't think I would have made it. I think I would have been stopped. So my stretch of Asia was across Turkey to Georgia. I think that's about 2,000 K. The other option I had considered was flying to Bangkok and riding 2,000 K from Bangkok to Singapore. But kind of in the big picture, I thought I'd rather ride across Turkey because I don't have to add in another flight.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that was not a very fun ride, but I did it. It's scary. It's a lot of truck travel. That's a big transport route from Europe to Eastern Asia. So it was scary. But, also cool to see.
I love that you just dropped in like, oh, it's 2,000 kilometers there. Like, it's like an afternoon ride for you. I'd still be out there.
I know, but it's like I was kind of looking at it in like chunks like that. I was like, okay. And then you're doing this like kind of calculus of like, okay, where can I get these miles? What would that look like? What's the season going to be like? And I can't do everything. But I did have to cross two opposite sides of the globe. So that forced me to go to New Zealand, which was awesome. I'd never been there, and it was so stunning. And it did add an extra flight and an extra ferry. But what a beauty. And it was the dead of winter. So it was like -7 every morning.
Wow.
And covered in snow, so it was like not the right season to go there. But I feel like at the end of it, I was like, I can't believe I'm 38 years old, and this is the first time I went to New Zealand. It was that stunning, So some of the compromises ended up being really, really cool.
Does it make you want to go and do more of that riding and see more of the world by having those experiences?
Yeah, I'm looking at next year trying to go after the Pan American Highway record. So that's Alaska, where I'm from, to Argentina. And that is similar to around the world. It's, I think, minimum of 14,000 miles. So that's probably like 24,000 K, 23, 24. But continuous. I don't have to fly to the next continent. I just bike there. And I've ridden all of that in Alaska, and it's such incredible terrain. It's mixed gravel and pavement and super mountainous. And then this route goes through the Andes, and it's, it looks incredible. And I haven't done any riding in Central America. I've only been to Colombia and Chile and South America. So it'd be a lot of new places too. And so I am thinking more like that, and also this around the world ride, I invited people to come ride with me. Anybody could come. And I loved that. It's so different from so much of the racing I do, where I'm totally solo for days and days, and this was more like building community around the ride. And that made it feel just like a celebration of cycling, and I love that. I love that I could do that at the same time as doing like a competitive effort. I just couldn't draft, so people would draft off me. I'd be like pulling this group of like 100, 200 people sometimes. And I thought, this is incredible, because it's not even like a real event. It's just something I made up, but the fact that people are so excited to kind of be part of my ride and show me their local places, and that just made it really special. So I'm really hoping to get to do that again next year.
No, I loved that there was like a sort of community feel around your like around the world, obviously record attempt that you then smashed. I wanted to ask as well, like sometimes with cycling, it does feel like it can be a kind of solitude. Do you find that, when people aren't there and you're just with yourself, is your mind like a good place in these moments? Do you like drift off to some like really nice palace kind of thing? Or is it something that you maybe dislike and you would rather then in those moments have people around you?
I think you get the whole spectrum, and it's such a roller coaster of emotions. It's like 1 minute it's like the most beautiful sunrise, and you have a tailwind and everything's going great, and everything feels possible. And then it's like a couple hours later it's the opposite, where the weather's horrible and it's a brutal headwind, and you feel crummy. And but I think the thing I know is that like no matter how I feel or what the conditions are like, they will change. You just have to kind of ride it out. And I don't mind the solo time. I mean, I've done a lot of that, but it's a place like I'm very comfortable. I'm comfortable in my own head and I don't really get too negative anymore. I think earlier on in this kind of racing for me, it's like it's easy to get into this like negative loop of like, I'm not fast enough, things aren't going right, this isn't good, why am I out here? And then I think, 10 years later, if I'm still doing it, I need to be able to like accept that I'm still doing it, and not ask those same questions over and over of like the why of it. Because I think like, big picture, I look at, is this worth it? And so far it is. It still is. I'm still excited to be out there. I'm still getting something new out of it. And it's evolving as I go. And I know like I am 38, so it's like I can't do this forever. So I feel kind of this piece of just enjoying it for now and then seeing what happens with the rest of my life and feeling really lucky and fortunate that I get these chances. It's like a lot has to go right for me to even start something like this. So, and then finish it, huge. So I think that's great. But I think for me, it's like once I've finished something, it's like in the rear view mirror, I'm just like looking forward to what's the next thing I want to do or, what's coming up and how can I put the pieces together to get to the next start.
And like, it must have made such a big difference to know that, even if you are maybe having a bad day, that your wife is going to be there at the end of the day.
Oh, actually, that made it a lot harder for both of us. Yeah. Yeah, because we had to deal with all the logistics of making sure like she could cross borders because it's a lot easier to do on a bicycle. Trying to cross into Turkey, she gets to the border and they say absolutely not. She can't cross into the country with a car with Swiss license plates. And I could just go right through with my passport. So then, she calls me and says, I can't cross the border. So then we're like, oh, well, what do we do now? So our friend driving her had to go back to Bulgaria. She got like somebody else in a car to help her get a taxi to the next town and then had to find like our network of bike friends. We were texting everyone, how can, do you know anybody that could drive Rue across Turkey and to Georgia? And then found one guy in the middle of the night that said, yeah, I can find you a driver to take you back to get your equipment and then take you back to where you are now. Another driver to drive you to Istanbul where she could meet up with me. And then he'd come the following day and take her the rest of the way. But for me, all I had to do was bike. That's a lot easier. So it's definitely more complicated, but I think, one of our big goals was sharing the story, and Rue's a professional photographer and videographer, so she was able to do that. But with that in mind, it was her job was to document, and my job was to ride, and so I carried the equipment I needed to take care of myself along the way.
And then, so looking back at it now, what were the best bits and what were the worst bits?
The best bits was how it worked out with having people come to ride with me. That was super surprising and really, really fun. I estimate that I had about 3,000 different people come out for different sections, and this would be families on cargo bikes with the kids on board, and they'd come for, 5-10 minutes, or someone would pop up and say, I'm going to ride the full day with you. And it'd be the biggest ride of their lives, and that was so cool. I saw so many people just excited to go challenge themselves, and I got to share that with them. And the toughest is probably, winter in the Southern Hemisphere, dark at 5:30 at night. So I had to ride in the dark quite a bit. Cold, big change from, riding in 35 degrees to -7. That was a tough shift in July. But, I think it was probably the biggest challenge is staying focused for that long, and also, I was really made it a priority to stay as healthy as I could. So that meant like sleeping 7 hours a night, trying to eat real food when I could. And that ultimately made it so I enjoyed the ride more. I felt like I actually recovered and could enjoy the days. But it definitely takes a bit of discipline to stay in the zone for that long. I didn't really have like downtime. My downtime, I guess, would be, pedaling instead of working on logistics. So, yeah, it was good.
You talk about like the spontaneity then. How does that work with trying to eat real food Like, do you ever get to the point where, oh no, I've just missed the town. I don't think I'm going to be able to eat proper food for a while?
I mean, I just ate everything I had, I guess. I tried to eat like a real breakfast. So that was great if like I stayed in a hotel. Often they provided that. And then, trying to eat some kind of a real dinner if I could find it. If they had like takeout Thai food, that was ideal. That's about as good as I could do.
And then did you have many problems with, say your bike obviously didn't get completely destroyed, which is obviously perfect for trying to break a record.
Yeah.
Did you have many other mechanical problems that you had to fix along the way?
Not too bad. I was pretty good at getting my bike serviced pretty frequently, like every 5,000 K or so. I try to go to a shop, and then every 10,000 K, I'd try to get like a full rebuild. So I probably swapped stuff out earlier than I needed to, but I thought I've got to do it when it actually makes sense, when I get to a good bike shop that can actually help me. And so, you're sitting there and it's like the middle of the day and I'm just watching the clock. Like, I need to get this distance done, but I know that this is going to ultimately be good for me, because the worst thing that could happen is I'm really remote and my bike breaks and I have a super problem. So that worked. Probably the biggest setback was, just keeping air in my tires. And sometimes that was kind of a challenge. I rode 32 millimeter tires, so they're pretty big, super heavy casing, set up tubeless. So they did hold, but riding back through the US on the Route 66, a lot of it was on an interstate highway on the shoulder. So I was riding through like stretches where there are lots of exploded truck tires, and they're full of wires. So then I had each tire had 10 punctures. So then I would be like dotting the punctures with super glue and hoping that they gummed up enough. But if I pumped up my tire to over 20 PSI, they just blow out. So I was riding the tires at 15 PSI. Which is like a beach ball, it's very, very soft. So that was kind of and that's also, it's they are holding. It's not efficient, but it's also mentally pretty taxing. Just thinking, is this going to work out? Am I going to end up riding the rims? It's not a great feeling. So I had that. I had gotten new tires, and then after 4 days riding on that, I had to get another set of new tires. And even at that point, I thought, I don't know if this is going to hold. And then the route ended up, because I was farther in the west of the U.S. where there just aren't many options for routing. And then I got into more of a population density and got off the main road, and then everything was fine. So that was hard.
What was the most sort of challenging terrain for you? Because I was going to ask, is it the day where you did 17,000 meters of climbing, but then something Route 66 with my tires, that wouldn't have sprung to mind. So what would you say along all of those days that you spent riding around the world? There's probably so many that you could pick.
I mean, probably riding into headwinds in Australia. And they have just flat, straight roads, and it's a rugged headwind. And I knew, it's not gonna change. It's gonna be like that for at least a full day, if not I think I had a stretch where it was like that for 3 days in a row. And I was like, oh God, this is really tough.
3 minutes in a row. And I'd be like, no, I'm done.
I feel like it's one of those things you sort of take for granted when you're riding back to where you started. It's yeah, we get a headwind now, but we'll get a tailwind later on. It's yes, but I'm riding point to point, then the same point. So you never get that.
Right, exactly. And you just think, oh boy. Because at least if you're going climbing a mountain, you'll get a descent at some point. You never get a descent off a headwind. So that was definitely the toughest.
And then talking about obviously changing equipment and tires and things, how much did sponsors help you, or how essential were having kit readily available for you for doing the record?
I would flying from Georgia to Australia. I started I was oh, I better get my bike rebuilt, because there it's you're in Perth, the city, but then you leave and you don't see another city for 3,500 K. So I thought, okay, I need a full rebuild. And then I got in touch with actually this local couple in Perth offered to host us when we flew in, which was super kind. And so we were like, okay, yeah. And then I wrote the woman and I was like, I think I should probably get my bike worked on too. And then she's like, oh yeah. She went into the shop and like asked the mechanic in person. And they squeezed me in, you know, and she's like, oh, you're really lucky that you told me today because they're closed tomorrow. And, you know, so I got you the first appointment on Monday. And then it ended up being a specialized shop. So they had like all the components that I needed for my bike. And so it was not always like from the brands, but definitely also from locals, just like helping me get an appointment or get into a shop, which definitely expedited the process. You know, and not all bike shops are the same, but I was super lucky there. I go in and they're like, they stripped my bike down to just the frame and then rebuilt it from there. And so riding out of that shop, it felt like a brand new bike. You know, that was pretty incredible. And then halfway through Australia, I got a new set of tires and a chain. And then that was it for the rest of that ride. And I think Australia was like 8,000 K. So
Wow.
It was a long stretch.
It sounds like it really sort of takes a village when it comes to something like this. But how do you build that community? Is it just the ultra cycling community in general?
This one was different because it was global. So it was like people that weren't even interested in biking were interested because the idea of like traveling around the world was so kind of romantic and exciting. So I think it got a different community interested, which was really cool to see, you know. And it's like the people I met out there, you know, I don't know if they were bikers or not, like riding through New Zealand, and they're like older people standing outside in the dark, ringing cowbells or shouting, you know, cheers and that kind of stuff. I was so amazed. It was so cool.
I just love the sound of that so much.
And then obviously there was a huge crowd when you finished, and you mentioned the relief before. Like, were you like that? Feel like that must have been something that you will never forget. The welcome that you got in Chicago.
Totally, and even that ride towards the finish, it was like when I got within about 1,000 K of the finish, I realized, oh my God, if I kind of pick up my pace and my distance, I could finish this in 3 days. And that idea, something about it just like kicked me into gear, and I was riding faster than I had the whole trip. And that was such a cool feeling to feel strong enough to finish fast like that. It just felt like flying. And then my parents had flown down from Alaska to be at my finish. Rue's family was there too. And I finished at sunset on the waterfront in Chicago. So it's like the most beautiful time of day, and it's just pretty surreal. I'll never forget it. But it was even, you know, that last 3 days, it all feels like it was like driving me towards the end.
Yeah, I feel like there's always that kind of like, I know I'm going to finish now, but it's slightly different when you're going like 50K to going around the world. Yes, I'm in the last 1,000K. I'm so close.
I know. Sounds crazy, but it really felt like that. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm almost there, you know?
And what was it like the days after you'd finished? How do you adjust to not riding so far every day, not being in a random part of the world?
Totally. Well, it was like the day after I finished, I took a full day off. And it was cool just to be in Chicago. I hadn't spent that much time in the city, and the weather was perfect. So even just walking outside, it felt so nice to not be rushed, you know, not to think, okay, I better eat this in 5 minutes and get back on my bike. And, you know, like I had to be so kind of systematic about everything. And so I could kind of just, you know, kick back a bit. But then it was like 2 days after the finish, I was ready to ride again. And I think that day I went for like a short bike ride with my dad on the waterfront. And then within a week, I was back to basically just training again, just because I wanted to. You know, I thought, okay, I'm not doing this because I have to, but now I just really crave the time on the bike. But instead of riding like 12 hours a day, I'd ride, you know, 5-6 hours a day and take all the bags off. So I just felt like, you know, the bike felt so light. And I came home and I rode my favorite mountain, and it just felt like I was like flying up the hill. So it's been fun. I mean, I think I'm in the best shape of my life, which feels awesome. Feels awesome to be on the bike. But I do realize I'm like only conditioned for riding. I tried to go for a run. And it was like the week after I finished, within that week, I was like visiting my sister and I didn't have my bike. So I went for a run, ran 5K, and I was sore for a week. I was like,
no, I totally get it. I would be the exact same.
So now I'm not running. I'm just riding.
What about swimming?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Bike riding, it's one of those things where you see cyclists going and doing a run that's really fast. And it's like, yeah, of course, but there's such different muscles that you're using for so long. Even walking probably would have been a bit weird after you finished.
Yeah, because I hadn't been walking much. I'd really just either been on the bike or off the bike for the most part. So, but I kind of can't believe that I still want to ride. It's like after all that, I thought I'd be super sick of it and burned out. But I think because I did it at in a sustainable mode, that I'm just happy to still be out here. And now where I live, it's like getting into the good season of the year where it's not super hot and it's just sunny and nice. So it's almost perfect.
This episode of the Cyclist Magazine Podcast is brought to you by Trek. Now, there is nothing cooler than a custom bike. Your own carefully selected components, a dialed-in setup, and most important of all, that custom paint. Now, Trek knows this only too well, which is why it set up its own custom bike builder program, Trek Project One. Now, trust me, Project One is seriously cool. I've been lucky enough to ride some Project One bikes over the years for Cyclist Magazine, and many moons ago, because Trek has been honing the program for years now, I visited Trek's HQ in the States to see the paint production line for Project One in full swing. So think Skynet meets tattoo artists. It's all sort of robot arms and painters in hazmat suits listening to death metal. Now, custom can be overwhelming, so Trek offers a range of Project One options, from the signature series of stock designs and colours to the Icon series, guided by the skill of Trek's in-house artists. And if you have the imagination for it, there's Trek's Project One Ultimate, which is a full gas custom paint program. Don't spare the retinas. Ideas are your only limit. Your one-of-a-kind bike then gets built by Trek's master builders and delivered to you, perfect in every bolt, ready to roll. Prices start from a £750 upcharge, so to start customizing your dream Trek now, exactly as you imagined it, head over to trekbikes.com and hit the Road Then Customize tabs. That's trekbikes.com, hit the Road Then Customize tabs, or look in our show notes.
And would you ever, like you said, you wouldn't necessarily do a around the world record again? Would you ever just take a load of time off and just go around the world on your own speed, which is still probably a record-setting pace? But would you ever sort of be tempted to do an extremely longer version?
Well, I kind of was doing that before I ever raced. So I got into this because I was traveling the world by bike for 7 years before ever racing. And so I did have that where I was just living off the bike, taking my time, no pressure. And it was cool because I liked being out there, but it was the racing piece of it, which was what actually made the sport exciting for me. I like that competition. I like that kind of pursuit of doing something I think is impossible. So I don't think I would go the other direction. I think instead of that, I would just start doing something entirely different with my life. But I don't know what that is yet, and I'm fine with that. I think, things always come up and things always change, and that's, the exciting part of life too. I guess at this point, I'm just still excited to be out there pushing myself on the bike.
It's one of those things I've thought about quite a few times. And I know you mentioned that you're thinking about doing Pan America next year. When you're finishing around the world, is there part of you thinking, how can I top this? Where do I go from here? This is sort of the height of what I can achieve in this discipline.
I mean, it could be, and I'm fine with that. I think for me, it's more what am I personally interested in. And that's what's always kind of driven me to continue doing what I'm doing in different ways. Like next year, the next thing I have up is racing the Iditarod, a winter race in Alaska where I'm from. It's 1,600K over frozen terrain. And that's so different than riding around the world. It's different equipment, different environment. But when I was out in the around the world ride and the weather was bad, I would think, well, it's definitely going to be worse in Alaska. So it's like I don't know if I think of like the height of what I can achieve like as a human, but more kind of what's driving me forward. And I think I have to check in with that pretty frequently because this stuff's just too hard otherwise. It's like I am doing it as a career and I'm really, really fortunate to do it like that. But I'm also like, the reason I'm doing this is for passion, and so if I have to be internally motivated to kind of go after the next challenge.
What advice would you give to someone trying to break your record?
I mean, I hope they get to like enjoy it.
Yeah.
I think that's the main thing with this stuff is like it's exciting and it's cool, but I think like one of the things that drives me is to get out of this like narrative of suffering, because it's like if all we're doing is like going out to, smash ourselves into the ground, it's like there should be, you get to do something incredible. There should be like a lot of joy in it too. So I hope that can be part of that kind of ride. But I do think my main thing would be just to like, if someone wants to do it, go for it. My ride's not the best. You definitely beat it. I guess that's it.
That's one thing I love as well. Like if you sort of strip everything away, like your pure like passion for just riding for riding's sake, like it's so evident, and you don't necessarily have to sort of look at things in how do I better it. And I guess that's also how you sustain yourself as an ultracyclist, because I guess if you're constantly chasing something, it can be very maybe overwhelming. I don't know. Yeah. But if you just kind of go from one challenge to a next, it just kind of seems like the dream way, really.
Yeah, there feels like an urgency for the next thing, and it's not like I've built out like a list of, I don't have like a bucket list, it's just like, but the fact is like, I do my best thinking while I'm riding. So while I'm out there, I'm like, oh, this sounds exciting. And then that might be the next project, which is, how lucky that I get to do that, and I think I meet a lot of people who are like, well, that sounds like the dream, you get to just ride all the time. And I'm like, well, it is, it's really, really fun. Yeah, it's hard, of course. But more and more I come to that where I'm like, well, even if we're not in competition, I feel like humans want to challenge themselves. They want to do hard things. Those are the things you remember. Those are when you do something hard, it's also when usually you get to see the most beauty too, or you get to see the biggest change. So I think I'm just invested in that right now. And it's pushing me to do more and more things that really scare me. But maybe that's a good thing too. It's like maybe when I hit that point of kind of fear is when I'm like, oh, that means I'm pushing myself outside of my comfort zone. And then I'm going to have like a really unique and exciting experience as well. Because it can start feeling similar if you kind of do the same challenges, at some point it's like, oh, of course I can ride 300K a day. And that sounds crazy, but everything does become normal at a certain point. Your body adapts. So I think kind of changing the focus is good for me.
What kind of things would you say that you fear? Not to sound like a therapist.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, like around the world, I was terrified of getting hit by a car, because that seemed like a real, like the biggest risk, riding in traffic that much. So I feel really lucky that didn't happen. And then like Alaska, it's like the cold, it's like last year when I raced, it was -40 for a full day. That is so cool.
Oh my goodness.
So then I'm like, oh my God, like, what do I do? And it's like, you have to have every inch of your skin covered. So that's scary, and then building up to around the world, I think most of the things come to me when I'm sleeping. Like I wake up at 1 a.m. and I'm just like, oh my God,
I've had a vision.
Yeah. And it was like, I was like scared my bike was going to break or, all these kinds of things. And then actually the truth is like, you're mostly scared when you're home. When you are like somewhere safe, you're scared of what's out there. But then when you're actually in the middle of it, you don't feel fear. You just are like in the moment and you have to deal with like problem solving, trying to figure out like, what can I do to move forward? Although the Alaska stuff, like last year I raced and I'm crossing a river and it's like -30 and I see like open water and that terrified me. So I was like, if I, rode into that, game over. So that kind of stuff, like
it's freezing cold, but I would kind of start sweating in that moment. Like I'm sweating now.
Yeah.
Like
From just this like terrified feeling, But that ride, the winter ride, it mostly is like you're just plugging along. You're not going fast because fat biking is very slow. So it's mostly just normal kind of moving forward. And then if something goes wrong, that's when it's like quickly can become like the exposure is so high that it's kind of life or death. So, just but it also, the other part of it is like, it made me much more thoughtful. Like I had to be more present and I had to make better decisions and be a bit more patient with everything. So I like that too. It's good. It's good for me. I'm a very impatient person and I rush a lot. So it's good to kind of bring me back to kind of focusing. Yeah.
What were 3 sort of must-haves that you took on your ride that people might not necessarily expect for you to have relied upon?
Oh, well, I had to have like a full rain kit. And I wore it a lot. It rained a lot. Let's see. Having like the right plugs for all the different countries, but I usually buy those at the airport. So if I flew in, then I would just buy it before I left the airport. What else did I have that was surprising? Main things were like, I like had clothing, I had a sleep kit, tools to fix my bike, and then my electronics and charging, and I think that's about it.
And if you were to do it again, would there be something that you didn't have this time that you would take?
I don't think so. I think I pretty much had what I needed.
That's always good. That's always
I
good.
ended up like buying some kit along the way. Like in Australia, I bought some shoe covers because I was surprised by the cold and the wet. And then New Zealand flying in, I was like, oh, this is going to be really cold. So I bought like a bunch of merino wool layers at the airport. That was good.
But it's probably good for your ride that you bought it along the way, right? Because you wouldn't necessarily want to be carrying all that stuff the whole time.
Exactly. I wouldn't want to carry it the whole time. I guess the super glue was pretty surprising how much I used that. And I thought there's got to be like a better product than this that's made specifically for tires. Because the thing I learned was I had it set up tubeless and I was carrying tire plugs, but often the holes were like not big enough for a plug. So then what do? Because you don't want to jam a plug in there because it's actually going to make the hole bigger. So then I was like, what's the fix? Because it's still losing air, but it's like a tiny, tiny little hole. And then road pressures are, of course, higher than other tire pressures. So you're trying to get more air in there and trying to keep it in there. And so I might just be missing something that already exists, or this is like something that the bike industry needs to work on.
Yeah, maybe that's the next thing. Once the cycling stops, now you know what needs to be created.
Yeah, right. I'm like, we need this tire fix.
Your own brand of super glue.
Yeah, right.
And what is, like, if you look back to yourself when you were younger, what is one piece of advice that you would give the younger version of you?
Oh, yeah, I would. I was so hard on myself as a kid. Like I always played team sports, soccer and basketball when I was really little, and I hated losing. It would like put me in a bad mood for the rest of the day. And I think I would be like, well, just results are results. Get over it. You give it your best go and then you move on. And I think it's taken me a lot of years to kind of get to that point. Like I always do try my hardest, because I think I hold like a higher standard for myself than even just like the finish line. But I think that kind of like just letting it go, letting it be, and not feeling like so much identity just from a result is kind of what I would tell myself.
At what point did you know you were going to break the record? Did you know quite far out from the finish, or?
But I never really like allowed myself to think that, because even in the last kilometers, something could happen.
Yeah.
It's like even if I got hit by a car there and then I couldn't move forward, that's it. You don't get it. You still don't get it,
Yeah.
So then I never really like let that, I never like thought about the finish really or let myself get there until I actually did finish. And then it was incredible, like my response. My parents were there. I just started crying, which I wasn't expecting to do. And I just felt this wave of relief of like, it's over. I'm done. And that felt like even more important than actually getting the record, And then, of course, like I'm super excited that it worked out and that I did everything I could to make that happen. But I don't know, even just finishing felt like a bigger deal.
What was the first meal you had after you'd finished?
Oh, my wife's parents brought me some pasta in a salad. And so I just ate that on the stoop or whatever, on the ground.
Pasta's always good. It's always a good choice. I think no matter what.
Yeah, it was good.
Have you ever felt you've got back to like a normal life since then? So, have you explained the different sort of mindsets of like wanting to go out? Can you have a normal life when you have your line of work?
Yeah, I mean, right now I've been home for a month, I think. So I'm sleeping in my own bed. I'm cooking my own food, and then I'm just getting stuff kind of set up for next year and going for day rides, or the longest is like a 8-day ride, nothing crazy. I think the difference was like just not being on the road, because like that 108 days, that means I slept in different places for 108 nights in a row. And then I even, like the week following the ride, I went for a little bike trip with my family, and I was sleeping in my tent, and I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, what hotel am I in? And then it took me like 5 minutes to realize, I'm just sleeping in my own tent. But I guess I was like, I guess that's a good thing, because I'm so comfortable. I thought I was like sleeping in a bed.
That's always good.
I was so used to kind of like waking up in some random hotel and kind of not knowing where I was. And it was kind of disorienting, I guess. So it's good to be past that, not to be having dreams about around the world anymore. That's good too.
And something you mentioned right at the beginning as well, and this is unfortunately our final question for you. We could keep chatting for ages, but I know you've got another goal. You were talking about running GRIT or GRIT and Girls Riding into Tomorrow, which is your cycling program in Alaska. How frequent is that, and what is it that sort of wants you to help and inspire the next generation of women?
Yeah, so that's GRIT. It's a program I started with a friend in 2017. And I started in Alaska. That program's still running, but I started another one in Arizona where I live now. I try to do it either every year or every other year, and it's for 12 and 13-year-olds. We do 6 weeks of riding to build up to a final camp out. And it's different every time. I usually work with a group of like 15 kids, and I get local women to be mentors, and it's incredible. Before the program, these kids have never ridden usually not more than like 2-3 miles, so 5K. And then by the end, they're riding like 100K. And it's
wow.
like, and Specialized, my bike sponsor, has always sponsored the program, so they provide bikes for each of the girls, and if they complete the program, they get to keep the bikes, and then they can come back in future years as student mentors and help the younger kids. And it's really a stretch for me because I'm terrible at organizing things. But I believe so much in this because I would have loved to do it when I was a kid. So every year I'm like, I'm never doing this again. And then it's so cool that I'm like, I have to do it again. So good. So I think I've done like, I've personally done maybe 5 seasons of Grit. And then my friend Anna that took over the Alaska program has done, I think, 2 or 3. So it's been really, really cool. And I know some other women around the world have kind of like taken this idea and made similar programs in their own communities. And I love that. You know, I think all kids could benefit from something like that. You know, the idea of like, you're at that age, 12, 13, you're kind of finding your own space, you're becoming independent from your parents. And, you know, the bike is such a vehicle for freedom. You know, you can, and then with the program, we like ride all over town on bike paths and go to different places for visits and work on different skills. So then at the end, the kids like know their local communities by bike, which is so cool because they get to keep the bike. Usually we do this like right before summer, and then they have like this bike and this group of friends, and they can go kind of do this stuff on their own, which I mean, I just didn't know that stuff existed when I was a kid. You know, I didn't know people traveled by bike. I never went camping. So I think all that stuff is pretty cool. And then really the main thing is like, I don't expect them to like have a future in cycling necessarily, but to take on a challenge that's like harder than anything they've ever done, and then finish it, and then have the confidence like I can do hard things, and not every minute's gonna feel great, but in the end it's worth it. I think that's like kind of the main takeaway.
That's a great note to end on. It's everyone inspired now. That's amazing. I'd say
I'm about to go out and ride around the world.
Maybe in the morning.
I love that. Yeah, I'll sleep on it.
Thank you very much for joining us, and all the best with your next challenges, which will be as big or bigger than the world. Cycle to Mars next, maybe be the next one.
Yeah, right.
Thank you very much. What a wonderful woman Lael Wilcox is. I just honestly, there's not many people that you speak to, and it's just like, this is just a happy, truly happy, and I don't know what she'd do like in a private life, but from that kind of conversation, she's pure joy.
Yeah, you get a vibe like a split second after meeting someone that you know what the interview is going to be like. And that one, I was just like, oh, don't hang up. Don't go. I don't have any more questions, but, you know, just stay on this call for the whole day while we work.
Exactly. I find fascinating. I find the whole thing about she's basically saying, oh, yeah, now I'm in the best shape of my life after going around the world. It's like, yeah.
I would not be, let me tell you that.
The thing with whenever I set myself a goal or have like an event, and I'll do it, and then I just basically won't do anything for a while. Because it's like, yeah, I've done it now. What's my next thing? But obviously, the time after you, for example, if you've done like a marathon, you're way fitter than before you did the marathon because you've just done a marathon. Probably people saying that's not strictly true, but yeah, maybe it's a lesson for people like me that maybe we should just keep going when we do things. That is very good, and so is Lael Wilcox. I have this thing, right? I want to know what you think about this. Isn't ultra cycling and ultra distance sports, running as well, I come into this, I find they're so romanticized in this day and age. People doing extra long distances like around the world, like ultra races, blah blah blah, and it makes me think, yeah, I want to do that. I think I could do that. But actually, when I really think about it, it would be like the worst thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, like I would hate it, but as a concept, it seems beautiful. Like just you and your bike, your loved one.
Yeah. Lovely
scenery, lovely places. And also, if you put like some kind of record on it, I'm getting stressed out.
Yeah.
Like, there'd always like be something in my mind where I can't like fully enjoy something. So I'm like, oh my God, we need to like leave immediately. So a really like maybe an ultra cycling event, not timed, just for chilling is in the future.
Yeah. Even that, like, it's the ones where I think if I did one, it would have to be the ones where you're just doing a really long day. I couldn't do the multi-day ones like on no sleep. I find the people that do that absolutely heroic. I think about myself when I've had a bad night's sleep, and I would not want to be around myself. And then you long down the bike, it's like, I kind of want to go to sleep, or not want to go to sleep straight afterwards. But
yeah, people that can function on like a limited night's sleep are probably like the backbone of society. And what I mean by that is it's not me.
Respect.
So I'm like, wow, that's amazing.
And because we're exposed to it so much in the jobs that we do and in the magazine, whatever, it's always like, yeah. I always think about it for a minute. It's like, that sounds great. I'd probably be really pleased with myself afterwards. It'd be a great achievement. But then I think maybe it's probably for my own health, probably better just to sit back, massive respect to anyone who does like all the ultra races, cross-continental stuff around the world. Fair play. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure I could do it.
Yeah, I don't think I could do it either, mate. We're better off like, on the sidelines, like cheering people on, like woo, and then watching them do it. And then when they pass, we get the scenery. So it's like,
exactly.
Lovely.
Be there for people. That's the lesson for 2025.
Exactly.
Do you have any New Year's resolutions this year, Robyn? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, one was to go to the gym. And guess what, Will?
You've done it.
The gym has not been to. So that's fun.
As long as you've not set yourself any, figures, I'd say you've probably got about 11 and a half months left.
That's true. And I re-downloaded Duolingo to get cracking with the Italian again.
When was the last time you were Italianing?
2 years ago.
Lost a streak.
I know, because when I stopped 2 years ago, I probably had like a streak of like 2-3 years, which was really annoying, and then just didn't use any Italian at all. And now I'm like, what was the point?
I think this is the key thing, and this is what I've learned. So I started Duolingo because I was going on holiday to Japan. So I thought, probably be useful to have some Japanese, or at least some knowledge of it and understanding like the symbols. Really into it, was knocking it out for ages, went to Japan. It was like, probably not necessarily functional for me to carry on Japanese, because I probably won't go back, at least for a while. Hopefully we'll go back, but not in the near future. So I thought, let's do something different. But then when you don't have like the place that you're going that you might want to learn for a goal that you're working towards, for me anyway, I guess this goes in with the whole, like, I won't do any exercise once I've done a big thing. But I just found the motivation just went. And the only motivation that stayed for me then was this bird needs to shut up. I need to do my streak. And then you're doing it really late. And I don't, I'm quite obsessive anyway, so I will do it. And I'm still doing it on 550 days currently. But I've been doing French, and I do French A-level, so I thought, it'd be good to top it up. We're in cycling. French is always good. Did Italian for a little bit, then I was going to France, functional.
Yeah.
But then it's just, I feel like I need something to aim for.
Yeah, it's like we need someone who actually speaks that language like fluently in our lives, and like living with them. I used to live with my friend Hannah, who spoke like fluent Spanish. So if I was learning Spanish, that would be super handy, because you could just like riff off conversations with them. And it's not like I went to the shop to buy an ice cream. Like
that's the thing with Duolingo. Does it really help? Like, I was doing Japanese for quite a long time. It definitely helped. Probably could have got by without it. It's just a travel tip. But the only real times where I used it was, I felt like really basic. Like, I felt like I didn't really have anything too complicated.
It almost feels like
I've
an
been doing
insult.
I've been doing this for so long, and I feel like all I've been able to successfully pull off is, how much is this? It was disheartening, but it was a good time. And also, I was in a shop in Japan, and I said, how much is this? Obviously not in English. And the guy thought I was fluent Japanese.
Oh my God.
He started talking to me back in Japanese, and immediately I was like rabbiting headlights.
Immediately,
oh my
you
God,
had
what have you just said
on your face.
And then I revealed to him that actually I'm not Japanese. It's breaking news.
Big if true.
Yeah.
Hold the press.
But then he was very excited to talk to me in English.
Oh, it goes both ways then.
It goes both ways. Yeah. Lovely people, Japanese, from my experience. Anyway, right. we should go and get on with some of our normal day job and keeping our Duolingo streaks alive.
Yeah, because they've updated the thing now. So when, like notifications and stuff, when my phone's locked, it comes up with like a Duolingo countdown now.
Yeah.
And the owl looks so mad. What is that about? It makes me want to not do it.
I told it not to do that because I can't be doing without pressure in my life.
I think I just like torturing myself.
Well,
on that note.
Thanks for joining us, Robyn. Thanks for listening, everyone. Well, see you next time.
Bye.